Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this very chilly Michigan morning. I think I got up and it was like -3 this morning. So hopefully you grabbed a nice warm cup of coffee because today we are going to go over Transaction Desk and the new features that are now live in Authentisign. So I am lucky enough to not only be joined by my very best friend in the world, but my co-host who's actually going to be taking some questions behind the scenes. Lisa, you want to say hi to everybody?
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you, Colleen.
Nice to see you too. Well, not see you, but hear you at least. So a little bit about Lisa is she has been well, I think Lisa taught me half of what I know in Transaction Desk many years ago. But Lisa has been a longtime realtor who uses this product just like I do. And we're excited to basically show you some tips and time-saving techniques when you're ready to write your contracts. So Lisa is going to be answering any questions. So if this is your first webinar with us, in your GoToWebinar panel, which is probably minimized at the right-hand side of your screen, or maybe a blue flower at the bottom, there is a questions box. And that questions box allows you to type in any question that you have. And Lisa will either jump in and say, hey, there's a question, or she'll, if it's something easy, she'll just maybe type a response to you directly. So feel free to ask questions today. I'm also going to record this class because both Lisa and I know as longtime agents, it's not like we write an offer every single day, right? So if you are writing an offer a month from now, you may want to fast forward to a certain part of the webinar today where maybe you kind of were like, how did that lady with the fuzzy hair say to do that again? So you'll be able to, I'll show you where to find this class link so that you can click on it and you can watch this class at any time. All right, so where we're going to get started today, I am going to show my screen. We're going to actually start wear a couple of hats, if you will. We're going to actually play the part of an agent representing a buyer first. Then we're going to go over the listing and setting up your preferences. And then lastly, we're actually going to help you set up a signature. And we're going to walk you through that signing process. So when you send documents out to your client, they can quickly sign them. And we're going to show you some new great features, as I mentioned, in Authentisign, how they've actually made the filling out of sellers' disclosures even easier. So we're going to cover all that today. So because we're going to cover a lot, feel free again to put any questions that you have in that questions box. And I think actually where we'll start is where you can find this class after we're all done. It takes me about a day to get the classes uploaded, but every class that we teach, with the exception of, I think, photos and orientation, is found under resources, and there's an education section. So right under education, you will see recorded webinars. So if you have to step away at any point today and you want to go back to this class recording, you're simply going to click on recorded webinars. And then once you click on that, it's actually taking you to our YouTube channel where you'll find all of our classes. And so if you click on videos, you'll see all of the classes as well as the date next to them. Just find the class you're looking for, click on it, and you can fast forward right through to that part you're looking for. All right, so hopefully that helps. I kind of like cheat sheets or takeaways. So this is a really easy way to kind of have that class recording to go back to if you need to. All right, so with that, let's actually talk about writing a transaction. So you're writing an offer. So in this case, we're going to pretend that Lisa has just listed this beautiful home on Westlake Avenue. You just showed your client this property and you're ready to write up an offer. The last thing you want to have to do is go into find a bunch of forms, fill out a lot of information that already exists. Because let's face it, looking at this MLS ticket, we can see there's already an address. There's already a legal description. There's already tax information. There's already 90% of what we need to fill into our contracts. So the last thing you want to have to do is go and fill all that in manually. That takes way too long. So there's an easy button. The easy button kind of looks like this blue splash, if you will. When you click on that blue splash, it's saying, okay, you've showed this property that's in the MLS And now you want to write a purchase agreement on this property. And so what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to start the entire transaction by just clicking on that little blue splash, which is start a transaction. But it actually does a lot more. So let me explain before I click on it. It's not only going to take all the information to fill out the forms, but it's going to do something else. It's going to actually pull things like the seller's disclosure, the lead-based paint disclosure. Because when you're working with your buyer, of course, those are all things that you're going to need to present to your buyer so that they can sign them, so that they can review that seller's disclosure, so that they can sign it. So instead of you having to piecemeal all of this together, right? Go and find the disclosures and save them, now send them out to your buyer. It's actually taking care of all of that for you. By clicking that blue splash button or that start a transaction button right on the listing you've just shown, it's not only pulling all of the data and who had it listed and what brokerage they're with, but it's also going to pull in those associated documents as well. So if the agent has, for instance, and I love when agents do this, Lisa's really great about it. If it's a condo, or maybe it's a site condo and there are bylaws, or maybe there are rules and regulations for the condo. Instead of having to go and get those and now have to send them separately to your buyer, if the agent has added them into associated docs, they flow right through your transaction. And when you're sending out those documents for your buyer to sign, they can see, review, and sign those items as well. So usually if they're bylaws, they're just seeing and reviewing them. The idea is that instead of having to do all of those extra steps, by simply starting this easy button, if you will, this start a transaction, it's not only pulling all of the data, but it's pulling those additional pieces in too. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to click on that blue splash, and it's basically going to walk us through everything that we need to do at this point. So of course, it's going to bring over the name. Now, a lot of people do tell me, Colleen, I like to have my buyer's name in there. And that's great. But remember, if your buyer is using you to buy hopefully multiple homes, you don't want to have to open 5 Billy Bob files, right? You want to know what the address is so you can quickly find that transaction. So if you'd like to add your buyer's name, that's totally fine. I would recommend probably putting a dash in that section and then putting his name just so it's easier. You don't have to open 3 files to find that particular transaction you're looking for. The second thing is templates are crucial. If you're a broker on this call, make sure that you have a listing package and a sales package, possibly a lease package, because the last thing your agents want to do is have to go look for a bunch of forms that are required for your office. Now, a broker can set up these templates for their entire office. An agent can set up templates as well. But of course, the nice thing on the brokerage end is you're making sure that all the mandatory forms that you require are actually right in that template. It's kind of no different than the big deal files we all used to grab, with all the forms inside. It's the same concept. So all of those required forms that you need for a listing or a sale or a lease or maybe even commercial, whatever you specialize in, those are automatically just added to the agent's transaction, and they don't have to think about what may be required or inadvertently grab the wrong form, which happens a lot. So in this case, I would be applying my buyer package, because obviously the listing, Lisa listed, we're going to pretend Lisa listed that home in the MLS. I'm now doing that click to bring all that information over, so I'm going to be working with the buyer. Down here, you can see it's already started to fill in that information. But here's another cool piece. When you are the brokerage and you're setting up your transaction, when you're setting up your transaction template, if you will, do you see how as soon as I applied the buyer package, it automatically put that I'm the selling agent? Now, it does give you the option, if you're lucky enough to hopefully list it and sell it, it does give you the option to add both. If you are a transaction coordinator, you can be neither the listing agent or the selling agent. You can select that. But in this case, because we're going to pretend that Lisa has it listed today, I'm going to say that I am the selling agent. And of course, I now want the wizard to walk me through making sure I have everything in place to set up those contracts. Now, I'm going to tell you, I love the wizard if you're just getting familiar with Transaction Desk. It makes it really simple. However, after you use the wizard a couple of times, you're going to say, you know what, I really don't want to click my way through. I would like to have everything I need, the same things I could do in the wizard. I'd like to have them right on my easy to use dashboard. And the good news is I'm going to show you how to set that up today too. So the wizard is great while you're sort of getting the hang of Transaction Desk if you're new to it, but don't feel like you always have to use the wizard. You can literally go in and do every single thing you can in the wizard right from a convenient dashboard that we're going to set up for you today. All right, so we've done the hard part, right? We found the listing that we just showed. That's the hard part today with no inventory, right? You're going to click on the Start Transaction button. It's going to pull over that information from that listing for you. Now we have to apply the packet. So our buyer's packet with all of our buyer forms. Remember, going to have a buyer representation agreement already signed at this point, right? I know I'm supposed to say that several times with all the NAR MLS changes. But now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit create. And that's going to allow me to now go through that wizard and make sure I have everything filled out so that when I open up those contracts, they're really ready to go. Now, as you can see, and was a really good example to use because you can see that all of the information is really starting to flow in as well as the picture up here at the top. It's bringing over the address, the county, the state, the zip code, the subdivision, what type of, what property type it was, when it was built, what's the school district, what's the lengthy legal description. These are all things that I see so many times agents are going and copying and pasting or trying to find the information. This is a nice, easy way to make sure that you're just bringing all of the data over without having to type in anything additional. Now, of course, there's a few things that on the buy side, it can't auto-populate. Like, what does your buyer want to pay? That's kind of in his head, right? So that's something it can't auto-populate. But the wizard will always be generic. So think of the wizard as it doesn't matter if you're on the listing side or the sales side, the questions will be the same, the wizard will be the same. The only thing you're going to do is you're going to go in and you're going to fill out your side of the transaction. So the listing side has come over. Now we're going to go into the purchase information and we're going to type in that information that we can't auto-populate, like what our buyer wants to pay. So we can see here that Lisa listed this for $725,000. Nice job, Lisa. And I'm going to go ahead and say that now I am going to offer $750,000 to make sure we're competing with the other offer that may be coming in. Down here, it's got a place for your EMD. If there's a counter and you have to give an additional EMD deposit, that's there as well. But let me show you your first time-saving tip today. And that has to do with property includes. So when you're filling out the buy side, you're filling in what your buyer wants to pay, what his EMD is, but there's a little cheat here. If your buyer is asking for things like the microwave, built-in microwave, built-in bookshelves, maybe he's asking for the fridge, the whatever it happens to be. Did you know that if you type that under property includes, that it will actually carry over to all of the contracts for the places that are asking for inclusions? So again, if you're typing in something like you want them to leave the washer, the dryer, things of that nature, if you type them into the property includes, that will carry it over to any form that's asking what you're asking for in the sale. Down below where it says property excludes, let's say that there's a dilapidated old above ground pool. Maybe you want to put that the pool will be removed before closing. You could actually put that in excludes and it will carry that over into exclusions that you're asking for. So by doing those, even though they look like they're on the listing side, and I'm going to actually show you this when we get into the contracts themselves, but by actually filling those two pieces out, you could very easily include if you're asking for appliances or if you're asking for a home warranty, whatever it happens to be, you can put that in property includes and then property excludes, same thing. And that way it carries over and it's less for you to have to fill out. All right, so let's jump into step 2. So you can see that wasn't too hard. Step 2 just really has to do with the dates that you want to appear on your contracts. Now, everybody kind of takes in technology at a different level. Some people are just getting started. I talked to a nice lady early this morning who said she's just getting started in Transaction Desk, never used it before. And if that's you, you may just want to use the basics. I'm going to show you one advanced thing here, just in case you want to better automate Transaction Desk, but it's completely optional. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't understand why I would use that. If you're brand new to Transaction Desk, you can simply use the basics. I'm going to cover one advanced feature just because people like it so much, and don't feel you have to use it though. All right, so the dates in this step are really just filling out the dates on your contract. So for instance, if you are, let's say you're shooting for a closing date of 45 days, I can go ahead and simply add that in. Maybe my offer date, which is going to be today when we're writing this. If you have an offer expiration date, that can go in here. So that's really what the dates are for, is to really fill those contract dates out. However, if you want to take it up a notch, and again, this is completely optional, don't feel you have to use this, but if you want to take it up a notch and automate it, here's a great way to do that. Especially if you're on a team, let's say that Lisa and I are on a team, and when Lisa lists a property, she wants me to make sure that I install the signs. Maybe I'm the team member that is in charge of that. Lisa can actually set up a task that when she lists a property, it notifies me, hey, Colleen, make sure you install the sign on this property. It's just one example. Maybe it's lock boxes. One I have set up in my own real account, I constantly forget to do the final water read, right? You know, that closing date, it seems to sneak up on me, and because I work full time at the MLS, I just seem to, it's like a mental block. So I actually have a reminder that alerts me 7 days before our original closing date to make sure that I have reminded either the client to do the final water read or I've taken care of that. That way I don't miss those important steps. So let's take a look. So normally, as I mentioned, when you're going through the wizard, you're really just hitting the next button or the previous button, and you're just advancing through those 5 steps of the wizard. But in this case, if you are looking to make it a little more streamlined, over here on the right, you will kind of see some additional options. And one of them is tasks. Tasks are just simply reminders, if you will, just to you or someone on your team so that nothing gets overlooked. Checklists right above it are just a number of tasks. So if you're a brokerage and you want to make sure that you remind them to turn their EMD in 48 hours after they bottom line an offer, if you want them to make sure that their file is turned in within 48 hours or it goes in the MLS within 48 hours, those could all be tasks that the brokerage sets up in a checklist, because there's a series of them, and they can be applied, even auto applied, to transactions. So that's a little more advanced. And again, we have a whole broker class that shows you how to do that. However, for today, let's say that Lisa and I are on that team, and I again am in charge of installing her signs. I'm going to go to tasks. So I'm going to leave the wizard for just a moment because I just kind of want to show you how this works. And I'm going to add a new reminder or a new task. So I'm going to say install a sign. This would be just a common, kind of easy one just to show the example. You could put a description in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to due date. Now, really in real estate, there are not really hard to do dates. What I mean is we're not going to install a sign every October 1st, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So it's really related to something happening in the transaction. So let's take a look. So you could make it on a specific date. We really don't use that very much in real estate though. You could relate it to a transaction date. You could relate it to a task being completed. Like if you bottom line the purchase agreement, maybe within 2 days you want to get that home inspection ordered. So it's actually when you've completed and you've turned in your listing agreement, then we can go ahead and have that task reminder for the next step. But in this case, we're going to make it nice and easy. We're going to say we're going to relate this to a transaction date. So I'm going to say that I want to install that sign 1 day after the list date on the property. Do I want a reminder? Absolutely. I definitely need them. So maybe I want that reminder on the day the listing is taken. And if Lisa and I are on a team, if you have multiple members of your team, you can add them right here. So I literally can click on the person that I want to get that automated reminder. So again, if I'm on a team with Lisa, she can add me. And I'll show you how you can actually set up your teams here at the end too. Scrolling down, do I want them to get a notification via email? If something changes, do I want them to get that notification? Or do I want everyone that's associated with that task? So if I have everybody on my team and I've taken a new listing, I want them all to know that. I can alert everybody as well. So the idea is you can set your preferences here, but it's just a nice, easy way to make sure that if you're trying to communicate with your team or you're trying to streamline it a little bit, this is a great thing to do. So there's tasks, which are simply reminders, and then checklists, which are just a series of tasks that can be even auto-assigned to a certain type of transaction. So again, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. It's completely optional, but it's certainly for me and those final water reads that I constantly feel like I'm coming in late on. It was a game changer. So feel free to use those tasks or those checklists as kind of just a way to automate it or streamline the process a little more. All right, so I'm going to jump back to our wizard now. And by the way, you can set those tasks up ahead. You don't have to do them on an individual transaction. You can actually set them ahead for future transactions too. So back to our dates, I've got the date we're writing our offer. Maybe I'm putting in my offer expiration date, even when I want them to apply for the mortgage or when they're going to have their mortgage commitment. All of those can be found right on the date field. Okay, so this is my favorite part. It used to be that you'd have to go in, it would show you who the listing agent was. So in this case, we're going to pretend again it's Lisa. But we've got Lisa as our listing agent. We've got the brokerage that Lisa works for. And then, of course, it's going to add your information. And it used to require you to go in and manually do that. But now we have that pulled over from the listing side, so we know who the listing side is. Now we're pulling in your information because you're creating the transaction. So you've now got all of the representation or the agency right on this contact screen. This next step, in my opinion, is the most important step. And it's the part, I think, where people get a little bit hung up. And it's why they create more work for themselves on the signing side. So let me explain what I mean. If you simply take the time to put in your buyer and seller names, or if there's an attorney who's reviewing the document, if you just take a couple of moments to add those contacts here and tell the program who they are, it will do 90% of the auto tagging in the signing end, which means you don't have to go in and move all of those blocks, which by the way, I hate doing, but you have to, you know how in many programs, you'll have to go grab the signature and put it by the signature. And you'll have to grab the initials and put them by where you're going to have them initial. This will actually do this for you as long as you complete this one simple step. So let's take a look at this next. So now we're going to add in our buyer. So we're going to click the add button. You could add yourself, but remember, we already did that for you now. You could add someone you've worked with previously, an existing contact. If you have your contacts in Google, you can pull them into TransactionDesk. For today, we're just going to make it nice and simple. We're going to add in a new contact. This is that step that I just referenced. If you remember to do this step, it will save you so much time when we get into the signing, you'll see. So if you click on that type, in this case, I know that Barry Buyer is the buyer in this transaction. Now you can also customize what's in this list. As you can see, I've added some things for different classes, but really in this case, I want to make sure I'm selecting buyer. And I'm going to put in Barry Buyer and then Barry Buyer's email address. And I'm just going to put in mine so I can show you some things on the signing as well. Okay, so next up, I want to just point out really in 90% of the buyers that I add, That's all I really add. You could go in and put the buyer's address but there are 3 lines I kind of want to point out. You may never use them. I don't use them a lot, but they're good to know when you need them. And that's really if your buyer is signing in a different capacity, meaning if your buyer is signing as a power of attorney, or if your buyer is signing on behalf of a corporation. So many times the attorney will say, well, I don't want him to sign Barry Buyer. He's not buying it. The company is. So if they're signing in a different way than their name states, again, power of attorney, or they're buying it on behalf of a corporation, or maybe it's an estate situation, something like that. And the attorney says, I want him to sign Barry Buyer, power of attorney for Sally Sue. This is where you can set that up. So in this case, if he's signing Barry Buyer, power of attorney for Sally Sue, I can type that into the legal name. Now, the legal name is what's going to be pre-printed underneath the signature line. So it's no different than when you're going into your contracts and it says Barry Buyer under where the buyer's going to sign. It's going to do that same thing. That legal name is going to be, in this case, Barry Buyer, power of attorney for Sally Sue. Same thing if you want them to sign in that capacity. So if you don't want them to just sign Barry Buyer, and I had an attorney who actually said, I want him to sign it Barry Buyer. It wasn't Barry Buyer, but same concept. Barry Buyer, power of attorney for Sally Sue. And then he wanted the date that the power of attorney was drafted in there as well. So that was all below the signature line. So you could actually do that. If I wanted them to sign in that same capacity, meaning their signature would reflect that, you could also just copy and paste that in. The idea here is if they're signing in a different capacity, you still have the ability as the agent to make sure that that signature is correct and easy for them to sign that way. In most cases, I never use that, so it's there if you need it, but in your average buyer situation, you're just going to put in their first name, last name, and their email address. I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and that buyer is then immediately added to the contacts. Okay. If there's an attorney, there's a new attorney role that we're going to look at in Authentisign today. So if there's an attorney, you also want to add the attorney here as well. There's an attorney role. So there's buyer, there's seller, there's attorney, there's a bunch of different ones you can choose from. And it allows you, when you pick attorney, to use this reviewer role in Authentisign, which we're going to talk about. All right. So good news. Just to kind of recap, in case you joined us a little late, we showed a property. We loved it. We clicked on the Start a Transaction button. It brought all the information over into the wizard, and now I'm just filling out the pieces that can't auto-populate, like my buyer's name, what the buyer wants to pay. All right, so step 4 is forms. So obviously, as you can see, because I picked my form packet for my office, all of the forms that my office requires have immediately been dropped in. I don't have to go look for them. If there is a particular form that I noticed, maybe I sold a home with a pool, and I'm looking through my forms and I'm like, you know what? I need a pool addendum. I can always go to this add, and I can go up to the search field because there's tons of different forms that we have available to us. There's GMAR forms and Grosse Pointe forms and Lenawee forms and Bay County. I mean, there's just tons of forms. So if I'm looking for a particular form, I can type in a keyword like pool, and it's going to immediately show me all of the forms that are available with the keyword of pool. So in this case, if I sold a pool and I want to add my pool addendum in, I'm simply checking it off, hitting add, and it's going to drop it at the bottom in my form list. Now, I'm kind of old-fashioned, and when I got my license 25 years ago, I had a great instructor by the name of Marge Frazier. I don't know if anybody else knows her, but she was awesome. I miss her to this day, and she always said, when you are sending forms, whether you're sitting with the client or you're sending them via email or you're sending them in an electronic way for signatures, it's important that your agency is first. And I've kind of always stuck by that. So when my broker created these, it put them in the order that he selected the forms. However, I kind of like my agency form to be first. So you can actually grab these forms, and you can put them in any order that you want. So if I want my agency to be first, I probably, if I'm already writing on this home and I showed it, I should be having a buyer representation agreement already signed. But for the case of our example, hint, hint, I'll just move that 1 second. And you can actually simply drag and drop these in any order that you want. Now, one thing I have to tell you, when I started using Transaction Desk, the one thing that was a little funny to me was that there's a difference between forms and documents. I guess in my brain, I kind of always thought a form was a document was a form, but in Transaction Desk, they actually mean two very different things. And so if you think of it this way, it will completely help you navigate this. Forms are those pre-filled out forms for your association, your MLS, your office. It's where you're literally just going in and filling out the blanks, and that's considered a form. So then when you jump to the last step, you've got the document step. And the document step is anything outside of those pre-fillable forms. So remember how I said when the agent fills out the seller's disclosure with where the seller's filling out, when the agent is presenting it to the seller to fill out, he's adding them into Paragon. So those forms are filled out by the seller. They're under Associated Docs in Paragon so that we can access them and we can send them over to our buyer so they can see all the information about the home, right? However, in this case, my buyer needs to review and sign those. So I don't want to have to go over to Paragon, save the documents, now open up Transaction Desk, and now pull in the documents, now tag. I don't want to have to do all that. So what it actually does for you is it pulls those documents, as I mentioned, into your transaction so your buyer can sign everything at once. They don't have to keep piecemealing or getting multiple envelopes to sign their documents in. I kind of use the envelope analogy a lot, because I like you to think of it as the documents that you're sending in Authentisign. It's almost like an envelope that all of your documents are inside. So you don't want to have to keep sending different envelopes, like one for their seller's disclosure to fill out or to sign because they reviewed it, and another one for their forms to sign because that's two different envelopes and it becomes confusing. This way, by doing that one-click transaction and clicking that button, it pulls over those additional pieces. Again, that could be condo bylaws. It could be a perk test on the soil. It could be a survey. Whatever that agent has attached in associated documents is now going to come over so you can quickly and easily send those documents to your buyer when they're signing things. Just makes it that much more efficient. So if I want to see, let's say I want to take a look at this seller's disclosure, I can simply click on it. This happens to be the lead-based paint disclosure. I think mislabeled them, but that's okay. Just two lead-based paint disclosures. So anyway, you get the general idea. Obviously, when you add the seller's disclosure in, then it's going to pull that seller's disclosure over. You can see the lead-based paint document. I think that's what they meant for the SD, but that's okay. All right. So from here, they also have a couple of other things like a referral form that they've included. So basically, when you're creating that one-click transaction, it's taking a lot of that work out. Instead of having to go get those pieces, they're immediately brought over for you. But let's talk about what this really is used for the most. If you have an offer to purchase that somebody emailed to you or dropped off at your desk, and you now want to counter that, you can even do that in Transaction Desk. And it doesn't have to be, so many times you get these counters back. They're all crossed up. They look a mess. You can barely read what the counter is, right? It's not very efficient. Now, also, let me put one caveat in there really quick because I got myself in a little hot water a couple of weeks ago. So just want to make sure I don't go there again. When we do these webinars, we invite all of our vendored MLSs, all 9 of our vendored MLSs, to come in and learn about these different products that the MLS offers. If you are with a board or an MLS that does not allow any changes on the purchase agreement, please see your board or your broker on that because I'm going to show you what the program is capable and what we do here in my market. But I am aware that there are some vendored MLSs that no changes can be made to the purchase agreement or listing agreement. It has to be done on a separate addendum. And if that is your policy, that's great. For where I am, I'm going to show you how you can add an addendum if you need to, if that's your board policy. But I'm also going to show you how you can make a counteroffer on that document without having it look all messy and sort of torn apart. So that's a little caveat. Again, if you're with a board or MLS that does not allow changes to the purchase agreement or any modifications, they have to go on a separate addendum. You can still do that in here. I'm going to kind of show you both sides of the aisle, if you will. Okay, so we're going to pretend for just a moment that I'm going to be sending Lisa. I sent her an offer, and Lisa's like, you know what, we really need 750 or 755, whatever. I can actually mark up an offer. I can actually counter an offer in here. So if you're on the other side and you just want to mark it up and send it back to the agent, you certainly can do that. So let me kind of show you what that looks like in here. So I'm going to pretend for just a moment that someone gave us a purchase agreement, and I'm going to always add those outside documents into the document section because I'm bringing something in that's not a pre-fillable form, right? It's already signed by one party, or maybe they've made a counter offer and we're going to counter their counter. I mean, we can do all of that in here. So in this case, I'm going to bring that offer that I just received into TransactionDesk. So I'm going to click on the add, and it's really easy to bring additional documents in. So it doesn't matter whether it's a copy of your EMD check. Maybe it's your pre-approval letter from your lender. Very easy to bring those things right into TransactionDesk. So in this case, let's see if I have anything in my downloads that would be easy to use. In this case, if I have something, maybe I scanned it or downloaded it, I can literally drag and drop it right from my computer onto this drag and drop strip. So just by grabbing it from my downloads, you can see I actually added it right into my outside documents. So if you have an offer to purchase, again, let's say you just scanned it in or it's on your desktop, you can add up to 30 files at one time. So I can go in and is it 20 or 30? 20, I'm sorry, 20. I can go in and I can say, okay, I want to grab my purchase agreement and maybe the addendum, maybe you had multiple pieces of this transaction. I can go ahead and I can say, I just want to grab and drag it onto that drag and drop strip, and it's immediately loaded right into your transaction. Now there's another way to do that. Some people say, you know what, I'm not really comfortable with the dragging and dropping. I think that's the easiest personally. But if you'd rather grab them from somewhere on your, let's say your desktop, or you have them stored in a file already, you can click on that blue strip. And let's say I wanted to add, we'll just add a couple of these just for the sake of time here. I want to grab those 3 and I want to add them to my transaction. You can see it's that easy. Click on that blue strip, grab them from your computer, and that will put them right here at the bottom for you so that you can work with those documents. So because I didn't grab a purchase agreement, let me just start off by saying, okay, let's pretend for a moment you just got an offer and you're ready to counter it. So your seller says, nope, we're not taking that price and we're not leaving the microwave. Whatever it happens to be, you can actually simply open up that document as you're seeing right here, and you can start making those changes. I'm going to try to blow this up a little bit because sometimes it's hard to see at home when you're doing this kind of live streaming. So I'm going to go ahead. Now, remember we added the washer and dryer in. So we're going to pretend for a moment that you're countering this. Your seller says, absolutely not. We just bought that washer and dryer. So I'm going to click on this little painter's palette at the top, if you will. Blow it back up here for you. That painter's palette at the top is simply marking up documents. So think of it as marking it up or using it kind of to create your canvas, if you will, of changes that you're going to put on this counter. So the first thing my seller said is we're not leaving the washer and dryer. So I'm going to go up to these markup tools and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to scratch that off. Now, again, if you're with an MLS or a board that doesn't allow that, follow your board policy. Where I am, my broker would just require that all parties initial next to that change. So just see your broker if you have questions on what your policy is. But in this case, I would simply do a line out. We're not going to include that. And then I would have all of my parties initial next to that. If I'm changing the price, now that gets a little more complicated, right? I can also see maybe they don't want to maybe they don't want to remove the pool. I can go ahead. Remember how I said if you include or exclude them, they're going to be listed there. So as you can see, that's exactly what we've done. We've included or excluded items. And if the counteroffer doesn't include those, I can simply cross them off here. If you want to highlight something, maybe you want to highlight that you've got them a year home warranty, or there's a particular item that kind of has been a hot button for them and you want to highlight it, you can do that as well. There's also this one. I don't like this one, to be totally honest with you. It's the free draw. I find it kind of cumbersome, and sometimes I get it on there and I can't get it off really easy. It's not my favorite. If you want to draw something on there or an arrow or something, you can. It's not really my favorite. I'd probably stay away from that if you can. But over here, let's talk about the price. So we got to this step, and now we want to counter the price. We're doing our counter offer. So we're going to go up to this top text. Now, when I do this, I kind of like to always draw my text box, which is what you're doing when you click that. I kind of like to always do it where I have a little open room, okay? Because that kind of allows you to see it better, I think. So I kind of do it off the page, or like, as you can see, there's no text in this area. Sometimes it's hard to see what you're typing if you do it right on the text. So if I know that my seller wants to counter this at 760, I can go ahead and type that in, but I have to tell you, I have OCD, and this like makes me cringe when I see people doing this. Because one, you can't read that. Two, it looks terrible and it doesn't match. And it's just a struggle for me. So here's a better way. If you're going to counter an offer, what I would suggest is first do it in an open area. Secondly, if you right click on it, you can actually change the font size. So I can see that's probably a good 10-point font, I think. Yep, that looks about right. Does look like it's bold, so I'm going to go ahead and make it bold. You can make it italicized. You can change the font, but one more thing. You could change the font color if you wanted it to stand out. But you see the problem with this? It's still not readable if I do it that way. So what I want to do is I want to change it from a transparent background to a solid background. By doing that, look how much nicer this is going to look. Again, that OCD sort of kicks in on me, but I can now set it onto the line, and in real life, I would take a little more time and even kind of shrink up this box, but I can set it onto the line. I can make any adjustments so that it looks a whole lot nicer. I'm not seeing all the scratch out behind it. Again, I'm aware that some boards don't allow that altogether, but if you're in our area, most brokers will just have everyone initial those changes for that counter. It does also allow you to keep a version, meaning versions, you have the original offer, you have counteroffer 1, counteroffer 2, so it gives you that ability as well. So we're going to look at that in just a minute. So for me, that's a much better option. And again, if I were really doing this in real life, I would probably change it to a 9. I can see it's still a little bit big. I would also shrink this down, but that's the OCD in me because I like it to look perfect. So moving on, you can do this page by page. So if you've got other pages that you want to counter, you're simply going to select the page and you can mark those documents up. I love that it just starts carrying over all that auto population. As you can see right up here at the top, it's already got who listed the property, what the agent ID is, what their email address is, their office phone number, as well as all of your information. But you can see it's already filling in all the important things like that lengthy legal description, when it was built, what's the address, and all of the details right from the wizard. There's one more thing that I want to show you in here. So I'm just going to close out of this. This is a great way. Again, you could save it. Do you want to save your changes? If I put yes, it will now save those changes in place. However, there's one other thing that I really, really like, and you can also do this right in the app. Yes, there is a TransactionDesk app. If you have not downloaded it, you will probably want to do that. Would I do an entire listing on my phone? No, I think that would be a horrible process. Is it great when you're at your son's baseball game and you can literally open up an addendum and do a quick change, or have a quick meeting of the minds and send something out very quickly? It's wonderful when you can do that. Or if you just need to make one small change, you can use all of these tools on your phone. It's very easy. I think it's one of the better form apps personally. And it's just easy to make those, to redline something, or if you just need to get a quick addendum out with, closing, let's say the closing date has been extended, something like that, really easy to do within the app. Would I do an entire transaction on it from beginning to end? Wouldn't be my favorite. It would certainly take a lot longer, but for the little things, it's great. And for this next thing I'm going to show you, it's awesome. So let's say we're going to use Lisa, and Lisa is the listing agent. I sent everything over to my buyer to sign. And let's say I sent the buyer representation agreement. Let's say I sent the purchase agreement, the seller's disclosure. The buyer representation agreement that we have at my company has what the buyer was looking for, what the buyer wanted to spend, where the buyer was looking, and it's got a lot more detail. It also has the buyer's phone number on it and the buyer's email address. Now, these are not things that even though I love Lisa, and as I mentioned, she's my best friend, these are not things I want to send to Lisa, the co-oping agent, especially if I didn't know her, right? So the idea here is if they've signed everything, if you've sent everything to your buyer to sign, and now you have it in one PDF, and you're driving along and multiple offers are, coming in on this property, how do you remove just your buyer representation agreement? How do you, or just a page or maybe one document out of that big stack you've got in your PDF? And that's what we call the document slicer. I love this. If you're driving along and you need to quickly get it out to the co-oping agent and there's just one document or one page that you don't want to send, maybe some contact information, or maybe you had an old pre-approval and you want to kind of back it out of there, so you're just sending the new one, you can do that. And here's how easy it actually is. So let's go back to our purchase agreement again. And I'm just going to preview one just to make it a little simpler for our example. So we've got our purchase agreement. And what I want to do is I'm going to pretend these are all the documents I just sent to my buyer. Right next to the markup tools, so we were at the markup tools before, right next to there is the document slicer tool. So I'm going to click that document slicer. And as you can see, this happens to be an 8-page, gosh, I didn't realize our purchase agreement was 8 pages. I was thinking it was 7. It's an 8-page document. But I'm going to pretend in this agreement that the first 2 pages here are actually my buyer representation agreement that is personal and confidential between me and my buyer. So really, I want to send Lisa these additional pages. I want to cut those first 2 pages, that buyer representation agreement, out. Now, this happens to be one document, but again, you could do this if you had the whole stack of buyer side paperwork. If they signed everything at once in Authentisign, I might want to take that particular document out. So same concept. So I'm just going to highlight what I want to basically save and send to Lisa. Then I'm going to go up to save. I always like to do the save as. I like it to be version. I like to keep my original. So if I save, I'm overwriting my original, and I don't want to do that. I want to save this as a nice, clean copy. So I'm going to do a save as, just my selected pages, and then I want to give it a name. So I'm going to call this my counter offer for Lisa. And I want to open it just for the sake of time because I want to show it to you right now. I could just save it and send it out later, but I want to go ahead and I want to hit save. And what you can see is it just took that 8-page document. It removed those first 2 pages. So now I can email this over to Lisa. So basically I've taken that 8-page document down to just the 6 that I wanted to send to her. And where this is really helpful is, again, how many times when they've signed everything that we sent them to sign, we end up having to print it out. We then end up having to scan it in. Then we have to pull it into TransactionDesk to mark it up. That's way too much work. Now you can literally open the app, use the document slicer, and just pick the pages that I want to email over to Lisa. So it's so much easier than doing it the old-fashioned way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump out of there. So remember, the big difference between step 4 and 5 in the wizard is simply 4 is going to be those forms that you're filling out. Step 5 is going to be the document side, and it's anything additional you want to bring in. So think whether it's a pre-approval letter, copy of your EMD, maybe pre-title that you ordered on a listing, anything like that, that would be a document. All right. So congratulations, you've completed the entire wizard. And I know what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, that's a lot. But actually, I went through all the bells and whistles here. So really in real life, just to kind of recap, you're finding the property you just showed. You are clicking on the Start My Transaction button. It's taking you into a 5-step wizard. The last thing you want to do is simply go in and review the forms that you filled out. You can do that by simply clicking on the form title. So maybe I want to go in, I want to review my purchase agreement. I want to review my agency. That takes you to what we call the form editor. Now, all the forms in your transaction are listed right here. So let's say I wanted to go back to that purchase agreement we were looking at. I can simply click on the purchase agreement and it will open up that form so I can start reviewing it. If there's anything that was missed, I can go in and add that. It's not smart enough in this case to do the check boxes, unfortunately. So I'm going to say we asked for that washer and dryer. So this is where that form editor does come in handy. So I can add anything additional that got missed. I can see the washer and dryer carried over up here. The pool is excluded from the sale. I'm also going to show you some really cool things as far as the signing with these little dots that you're looking at here. If there is a place that your seller or buyer is given a choice to fill out, because let's face it, the sellers and buyers, they don't know these forms like we do. But if you're going to give them a choice, yes, you want to provide a home warranty, or no, they're not asking for a home warranty. You can even use something we call radio buttons, which I'm going to show you in just a minute, which allows them to say, yes, I want the home warranty, or no, I don't. It doesn't allow them to do both. If you make it optional, you know what happens? They click both of them. Now you've got an invalid contract, right? So not helpful. But these radio buttons allow you, the agent, to set it up so they get a choice, yes or no, and then they can fill it out on their own, and it won't allow them to select both. It will only allow them to select one or the other. So I'm going to show you that. I love that feature because it keeps us from having all those things that we have to scratch out afterward, because again, we know these contracts much more than they do. So in the forms editor, this is basically your last step to kind of go through and just make sure the forms look exactly like you want them to. As you can see, a good amount of the form is already filled out for me. But if I go up to file, this is if I forgot a form and I'm all the way to this step, I can add a new form in quickly. It will auto save for you every 30 seconds. So you don't have to worry if you forgot to hit save. It's totally okay. It's going to save every 30 seconds for you. If you want to save it as a PDF, so it's on your desktop, you can do that. I do want to caution you about something, and it's meant to do this, but I do get a lot of calls every week on this. People will try to save it as a PDF on their desktop and then open it up without going into TransactionDesk and make changes to it. It's not designed for that. It wants to keep track of your changes. It wants to make sure that you have the versioning that I mentioned. And so the idea is when you're changing those documents, you really have to do that in TransactionDesk itself, okay? A lot of people think, I'll just use a PDF writer. It doesn't work that way. It's actually password protected. And there's a reason for that. The reason technically is if you leave your brokerage, the broker doesn't want you to be able to just keep using that form, right? If you leave that brokerage, you can see the old form, but you can't create new forms under them, right? So that's kind of why it's done that way. But I kind of wanted to explain because I get a lot of calls on that. The other thing is if I want to erase and start all over, very easy to do that. If I want to watermark something as a draft or confidential, I can do that. If I want to remove a particular form, I can do that from here. You can print them, you can send them via email, via fax. I don't think most people fax anymore, but you can send it via fax, and you can send it very quickly out via email here too. You can change your fonts, pretty self-explanatory, but I do want to show you this new feature. Well, it's new for many. If you don't have this in your current TransactionDesk, it's because you haven't made one. As soon as you make what we call a clause, you will start to see that appear at the top of your form. So let me kind of explain what a clause is. Especially right now with all of the changes with the NAR settlement and MLS practice changes, where we're not putting commission in the MLS anymore. There's a lot of times that agents are struggling. I mean, it was a big change, right? We've never had to do this before. And agents were kind of struggling. How do I, on the purchase agreement, make sure that I'm getting paid? And so a lot of brokers were setting up canned language, basically, that they wanted their agents to use, stating, how it was to be specified, because we obviously want it to be fully negotiable. We also want it to be completely transparent. And so agents were struggling with the exact verbiage to put on their purchase agreements to make sure whatever the amount was, that the language itself, so not the amount, but the language asking for it was appropriate. So brokers were encouraged to create what we call clauses. And you can have clauses for anything, by the way. It could be that the buyer has 7 to 10 days to complete their home inspection. All results must be turned in writing. That's not in your personal PA that you use. That's something that can be set up in a clause. Maybe you have a transaction fee at your company and there's particular language and you don't have it hard coded in your particular PA that you're using. You could set that up to be inserted as a clause. So let me kind of show you the concept of a clause. Let me find a good area here on my, okay. So let's say other terms and conditions. Maybe this is where I'm talking about, what the seller and buyer are agreeing to via commission. What is that negotiated amount? Or again, maybe a home warranty that you're asking for. I can go in and click in that area and click add clause. By the way, if you're setting this up, you can set it for yourself if you're an agent. If you are an office admin, you can set it up for an entire office. So if I want to use language that my office has set up, I can go right to the ones my buyer created and I can see, oh, okay, so here it says the seller to pay buyer broker compensation of X. And you can see it's negotiable. The number's not there, but the language is. So instead of me, the agent, having to create my own legal language, which makes my broker cringe, by the way, I can actually just select the language my broker has already pre-approved for me. And you can set up even different libraries of clauses, if you will. So I can set up maybe clauses for a home inspection. And I want to go into any of my, maybe I can set up clauses for home warranties, property showing clauses, the furnace to be professionally cleaned and inspected. I can add multiple clauses even. I'm just going to grab a couple just for the sake of time here, but I can click them and I can put 4 or 5 clauses in there very easily. But the nice thing again is if you are a broker, I really encourage you to put that language together for your agents. So they're not trying, let's face it, I'm not an attorney. I would be bad at creating my own legal language. This is really nice when I can actually just use what my broker has already set up for us. And he likes that too. Okay, so again, you're kind of just doing that form preview, and that's really the entire process of creating a purchase agreement. I know it seems like a lot, and it is because I sort of went over every step, but in real life, we did 5 basic steps. We started off by finding the home in the MLS, clicking that easy button, pulling everything over into our transaction, having all of that auto population take place. Then lastly, all I have to do is fill in that missing information. Now, as I mentioned, that's really good, but you don't want to have to use the wizard each and every time. So what you can do is when you start a transaction, you can actually set up your dashboard just like I've done here. I'm going to be honest, Transaction Desk out of the box does not do this for you. This is something that I promise if you take a minute and do it, you will love it. This is where that recorded class will come in really handy too, just in case you want to set it up just like this. I have literally mimicked everything that you can do in the wizard right on my dashboard. So for instance, just to kind of review, that 3rd step in the wizard was adding a contact. If I want to add a contact, I can simply go to my dashboard, hit that same add button, and it's going to look the exact same way. I'm going to go ahead. This is where I added our buyer. So I would do that same thing and I'd put in that buyer contact information. So in order to make this dashboard what I think is usable, you have to customize what Transaction Desk gives you. They give you like checklists and tasks right really out of the box. You're not going to use that. But what you want to do is you want to unlock this lock and you can drag and drop whatever you want into your dashboard. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't use any of these blue ones on my dashboard because you only get so much space and I can really do all that stuff from the left-hand side of my page. So what I like to have on there is my overview. I like to have my contacts, all the stuff you have in the wizard. But I also like one additional one. And I promise you, if you remember nothing else, this is worth the class today. See how I've added this Authentisign box? There's a reason. It's not there automatically, by the way. But did you know that every time your clients sign the documents in their envelope, if you take the time to add the Authentisign box, did you know it will automatically take them directly when they're signed and put them in your file in your Authentisign box? I actually had I helped them buy their home in Sterling Heights. They called me 3 years later and said, hey, we were looking to sell. Unfortunately, they were going through a divorce. And all I had to do was open up my transaction desk file and everything they signed, their closing paperwork, their offer to purchase. I could see when they bought it, when we closed, what they paid. All of those details were right in my Authentisign box because every single thing that they sign automatically gets deposited back in your file. So add this Authentisign box. It'll keep you from having to go to Authentisign and try to find what you sent. It'll basically link the documents you've sent in your envelope to the file they're going to automatically be put back into. So to add the Authentisign box, all you're going to do is you're going to go to these green boxes right here, as you see. You're going to grab Authentisign, drag it onto your desktop. You can even make these boxes larger or smaller to fit more in. And then you just want to remember when you have your dashboard all set up, you just want to remember to go ahead and lock it so it doesn't shift around on you. But I've added my forms, my documents, my Authentisign, contacts, and overview. So basically everything I could do in the wizard, I can do plus I've got all of those documents that are signed returning right back to that file. So I hope that helps. All right, so congratulations. You did a purchase agreement from start to finish. You're ready for your clients to sign, which we're going to do in just a moment. So the listing side is very similar, but there's one big important difference. I want to point that out. When you start on the purchase side, you've generally shown that home. It was in the MLS. So that's where I want to pull the data from. But if I'm listing a brand new listing, maybe it's never been listed before, maybe it was a for sale by owner, even if it wasn't, even if it previously was listed, I never want to trust another agent put the information in. I kind of want to always do that myself, and I want to make sure everything is right. Not saying agents don't, make mistakes, but it does happen, right? But I want to actually put the information in right from the trusted source, right from the assessor's tax office, if you will. I'd like to bring over that lengthy legal description, who owns the property, all of that. I want really to come from a trusted source. So I'm really not going to start in the MLS for that. So that was the hardest part of Transaction Desk for me, is where are you starting? If you're starting on the purchase side, you're really starting generally from the MLS, unless it was a for sale by owner, it's never been listed before, something like that. On the listing side, though, that's where we really want to start in Transaction Desk itself. So if you've never gone into Transaction Desk, let me show you where you're going to find that. You're going to go right up to Resources. And under Resources, and think of Resources as like your agent toolbox. I like to tell people, not only can you find the recording of this class, upcoming classes, how many Con Ed credits you have, all that's there, but this is where you have all of your tools. So in this case, we're going to go right into Transaction Desk because we want to list a property not from what was in the MLS, but from actual tax records. All right, so let's actually do a new listing. So I'm going to go over here to the left. This is going to show you all my files here. You can always tell too which ones you brought in from the MLS, right? Because you can see the photos have been imported, or you can manually add them too. But I want to go in and I want to start a new listing. And there's one little trick here. This is one of those time-saving tips you might want to jot down. I'm going to go up to add. And I'm of course going to give my listing an address. Again, if you wanted to put the buyer name next to it, you could do that as well. I like to use this one just because it's kind of easy to remember. So I'm going to put in my 41539 Wessel. Because it's a listing, I of course am going to apply my listing package. Because I did that, it's telling me, oh, yep, you're the listing agent because I'm applying the listing package. Now remember, that's a broker setup thing, but I love it. Makes it just one step easier for me. But this time, instead of importing from the MLS, I'm going to import it from the tax records. So I'm going to say, instead of bringing it in from the MLS where this was already filled out for me, I want to go to Realist. Okay, here's the tip. So when Brian put this all together, and I was all excited, and he's showing me, and Brian is our tech guy, by the way. He's very smart, can build code, just does an amazing job. But when I saw this, he said, you know what, all you have to do now is put in the tax ID. And I said, Brian, agents don't memorize tax IDs. We know addresses, so we need it to work by address. So here's the little tip you're going to need to use. If you wanted to import from the tax records, all you have to do is go to the little magnifying glass to the right, and you're going to put in just 3 pieces. I know there's it looks like you got to fill this whole thing out. Please don't do that. I can almost promise you it won't work if you do this. If you're using tax records, they're very exact. Meaning if you put in Boulevard and you spell it out and the tax assessor's office has it BVD period, it's not going to pull. So here's what you need to know. And I promise this is one of those things you probably want to jot down. The one thing you do need to know is what is the county? And by the way, we've purchased all 83 counties in Michigan. So no matter where you're listing, this is going to work for you. So I am going to list this property in Macomb County by me. So I'm going to put in Macomb County. The only 2 pieces of information that I want you to add here are the street number and the route street name. So this happens to be Wessel Drive, but you don't want to put that in. You just want to put in the route name. So I'm going to put in, instead of Wessel Drive, I'm just going to put in Wessel. Because remember, tax records are so exact, less is always best. It will find it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say search tax data. As soon as I did that, you see how it automatically found that? If I would have put in Wessel Drive, see, it's got the DR and no comma or no period, just a comma. So I might have put it in incorrectly and it wouldn't have found it. So I'm going to go over here to the right. I'm going to hit select, and I'm going to use that now to start my listing transaction. It does a couple cool things I want to show you. The first thing that it does is, yes, you're going to get all that population, the lengthy legal description, the tax number, the school district, all that stuff starts to populate. The other big difference is it will bring in the sellers of record. That's right. Instead of you having to manually type in your seller's name, it will actually pull that in right from the tax records. Of course, if you need to change it, let's say they sign with an initial, something like that, you can always go in and edit. But it's a lot nicer when it brings most of that information over for you. The other cool thing that I want to show you that this does is the data sheet. This is probably the number one thing I think people don't know that will save you a tremendous amount of time. So when you're filling out your data sheet, and I have a little OCD, so I always put my own listings in. So I fill out my data sheet, and then I was going back into Paragon, and I was entering all that listing information, and it was taking a long time. If you have your office admins putting in your listing, you're still doing the same thing. You're filling out that data sheet so they know what to enter, right? But then you're turning it over to them, and you're now expecting them to enter all that same exact information. That takes way too long. Let me show you a shortcut. On your data sheet, which can start pulling all the information in from the tax records, here's what I generally do. I think I got this open twice, so pull that up. So on our data sheet, everything in the data sheet that's listed in red right there, that's a required field, meaning you have to put it into the MLS in order to make the listing live, right? But what if I told you you could use this data sheet, you could fill it out like you do now, and you could click a button up at the top and it would actually transport all of the data from the sheet into a listing in the MLS without rekeying anything. Wouldn't that be nice? Because I didn't know this for a long time, and I was entering the same thing again and again. I'm like, this is dumb. I'm entering on the data sheet, and now I'm entering it into the MLS. Same exact data. What a waste of time. But you're probably thinking, well, Colleen, I generally fill out a lot of this at the home, and you're absolutely right. So here's what I do as a listing agent. I'm going to fill out as much information on the data sheet as I know. And of course, this is where I'm filling out my listing agreement. I'm filling out all my agency disclosure, my addendums for the listing, whatever it happens to be. I'm filling that out right now. But there are certain pieces I don't know yet. For instance, I don't know the room measurements yet. I don't know the final listing price yet, right? Because I haven't gone on the listing appointment yet. So I save as much information as I can into the data sheet. When I'm at my listing appointment, that's where I'm jotting down my room measurements, which, by the way, if you're using Kubicasa, you can literally copy now and paste them into Paragon. I love Kubicasa, which is a floor plan app. It takes 5 minutes. It's free. You literally walk around your listing and it actually does the room measurements for you. It creates a floor plan. Even if you're with our vendor MLSs, you guys have Kubicasa through us as well. I love it's one of my favorite products. There's a class on it too. I'll show you where you can find it at the end. But I don't have those details here. So what I do is I will take my data sheet and I will now fill the details in and I will now save it. So after I've gone on my listing appointment, I come back to the data sheet, I fill in anything that's missing, like my final listing price, like my room measurements. I hit save and I click this little button at the top. That upload listing button is going to save you so much time because what it actually does is it creates a partial listing that you can see and your office admin or broker can see too. So when you click that button and I now go to partials, I can see any partial I've created, but let me show you what the admins at my office see as well. The admins at my office see any partials I've created. And let's say they were going to go in and put the photos in for me. They can literally click open that listing. They can edit it. They can change it if they need to. They can add the pictures or maybe the seller's disclosure. Once they hit save, that listing is live in the MLS. So it's like you get to open it up as a partial, add in any additional pieces like your photos, because most boards do require a photo. And so I can go in, I can add that in very quickly. I can then hit save, and now my listing is live in the MLS without me having to rekey in all of that stuff. That's a huge time saver. So whether you're doing your own listing entry or your admin is, the data sheet is one of my very best friends. Lastly, once you have all of the documentation prepared, very easy to send these out via email. Again, you can send not only forms, but you can send out the documents as well. And you can send them out via email or via fax. A lot of people, and I know Lisa does this, she, I think, was the one who originally showed it to me. A lot of people, if you're looking to send things out quickly, remember, you can also go right to the right-hand side when you're in your transaction. You can add things like conversations you had. If you want to log a call, you can see the history and the form versions. If you want to quickly send out all of the forms, you can just check them all off, click on that basket, and I can print them as a PDF. I can send them via email. I could delete a particular form or even an entire transaction if I wanted to. So it makes it really easy. All right, so let's go over the signing portion. We've done the purchase side. I quickly kind of showed you it's the same generic wizard on the listing side, but you certainly want to pull from the tax records. That data sheet makes it very simple to not only fill out all the information, but to make that listing live in the MLS. So the last piece, of course, is Authentisign. Authentisign is the signing part. So TransactionDesk is the filling out of the forms, right? The signing part for your clients to sign their documents is called Authentisign. But if you do them correctly, Authentisign should never take more than a few seconds because you're really doing all of the heavy lifting in TransactionDesk. You're filling out the forms there. You're filling out the contact information. You're doing any counters there. So really, it does make it super simple to send documents out for signing if you do all the heavy lifting just like we did right in Transaction Desk. So let's do a brand new signing. So we're going to say that we are going to add in a new signing. But there's one important step. And as I mentioned, there's a couple cheats I'm giving you that really aren't kind of included in the Transaction Desk material. But where it says optional, I never want you to think of that as optional, because everything you send out for your clients to sign, that envelope going out for your clients to sign, remember how I told you you want it to go back into that file so you can see it and you don't have to touch it, you don't have to move it, you don't have to, they sign, it goes in. That's the process, right? So where this says optional, I don't want you to think of that as optional. So if we are going to sign forms for our purchase today. I remember it was Westlake. I couldn't remember the name of the address. So Westlake, Billy, our buyer, is going to be signing all of his contracts that we set up in our Westlake transaction, our purchase. So I'm going to say everything that that buyer signs, I want to go back into that file. Now, of course, your signing name is really what you're calling your envelope. So if you were going to leave documents at your front desk for your buyer to sign, you might call it purchase documents for Don Smith. You could do that right in your signing name. So I'm going to call this PA documents. That's also what will appear in your subject line automatically unless you change it. So I'm going to say, okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to sign our documents that we created for our purchase file. All right, so they've made this interface even easier. And by the way, you now get high resolution documents. You can see it's kind of even changed color, and they've just made some really great enhancements so that your counters, your documents are now high resolution, so you can see them better, you can counter them better. But basically, there's just a couple quick things you need to know. You did all the hard work in Transaction Desk, as I mentioned. So what we're going to do is we're going to click add who we want to sign. So add our participants. Now, we could add ourselves, but we already did that. We could add our fictitious buyer, but we did that too already. So all we want to do is we want to pull from the transaction because we did all of the hard work already. So we're going to say, I want to pull from the transaction. And as you can see, here's Barry, our fictitious buyer. Here is our listing agent, which again, we were kind of pretending for today it was Lisa. So if I want my buyer to sign them, and then I'm going to witness them, and then maybe I want them to go to Lisa after they're signed. I'm actually not going to send it to poor Richard because he'd be very excited that we're just sending them this massive offer, right? So the question is now, though, how do you want this signing to go? And there are 3 different ways that you can prepare this, but they're a little bit tricky, so let me kind of explain them. A remote signer is just anyone who's getting it in their email. They can sign it with their fingertip. They can click with a mouse and sign it. Very easy to sign, but they're basically going into their email to get it. A reviewer is really set up like an attorney. That's really what this reviewer role is, and they've just made some changes to this. So let me explain. Generally, an attorney is going to want to review the documents before they go to the client, to the buyer. So let's say the attorney wants to review them and the attorney notices the name is misspelled or the power of attorney or something like that. The attorney can actually reject the document. It even has a place where they have to give a reason of why, and then it sends it back to you, the agent, so you know, okay, the closing date's wrong or the name is spelled incorrectly, so that you can make that correction and then resubmit it to the attorney. If the attorney reviews it and says, yeah, this looks great, he can hit accept and it now goes on to his client automatically. So it's a way that they are not signing, but they're accepting or rejecting, and they can give a reason why. The nice thing about that is you have proof that you sent it to the attorney and they reviewed it. Then it went on to the client for the signature. So it's a way to incorporate that attorney in the role too. Even though they're not really signing it, it's still capturing the time and date they reviewed it and even the IP address of the computer they reviewed it on. So we now have some tracking as well. The last one is CC. And by the way, this is not like CC on an email. People get a little confused here. This is not just sending along a copy. The CC rule here is designed if you are sending this to a title company or a lender upon an agreement. Meaning, if I CC my title company in, as long as everybody signed it, it automatically will be delivered to the title company. And I can even put a personalized message in, like, this is a divorce situation. Please have separate closing rooms. And I've instructed them to give a copy of the divorce decree to you, something like that. So you can actually set it up so it's automated and you don't have to keep touching it. It just automatically goes once everyone signed it to that title company or that lender. So it's just kind of a way to automate it. The next thing is, so I've got that they're both I'm going to witness from my email. My buyer's going to sign it in his email. Again, if I wanted to include the co-oping agent, I could. But then the next question comes up, well, what happens if you include that co-oping agent? How does it know when to send it? If I were to send it like this, guess what? Everybody would get it at the same time. And basically, the co-oping agent, Lisa, would think I'm kind of silly because I just sent her a blank purchase agreement. That would not be good. So there's one more step, especially if you're going to include the co-oping agent. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're just sending it to your two buyers, your husband and wife buyer, you could send it simultaneously. You really don't care who signs it first in that case, right? However, if you're including the co-oping agent, now I do care who signs it first because I want to make sure it's all filled out before it gets there. So in that case, I want to set the signing order. So by clicking here, I'm saying I want it to go to my buyer. Then I like to witness it after just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And then I want it to go on to Lisa, the co-oping agent. In this case, Richard, the co-oping agent. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select that I'm sending it to these three parties. But now I have the ability to set the signing order. So as I mentioned, I like it to go to my buyer first. I like it to then go to me just to make sure I didn't miss anything. I didn't miss any initials, anything like that. And then I want it to go to the co-oping agent. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. And actually, I'm going to take him out of here because, again, I think I would really bum him out if I sent him a $750,000 offer and then said, just kidding, I was just teaching a class. So I'm going to take him out. But you see how you can actually set that signing order here. Lastly, I just want to figure out, what am I going to send them to sign? Well, again, we did all of the hard work in Transaction Desk. All of the documents, everything from the filled out seller's disclosure and lead-based paint that we brought over from Paragon, to the purchase agreement, to the home inspection, to our sprinkler addendum that we added, or our pool addendum, I'm sorry. So I can actually simply just go right down the list. You can see it kept them in the order I like my agency in there first. I go right down the list and just pick what I want to be included in this signing. If I've forgotten to add, let's say, the pre-title or something like that, I can upload an additional document. And then lastly, I'm going to kind of explain this quickly. Under My Files, what is that for? Well, let's say that I took some buyers out. We wrote a purchase agreement up on 123 Main Street. Now, in that file, I have their pre-approval, their copy of their EMD, my buyer representation agreement. It's all set up for those buyers, right? We have a bad home inspection and the deal falls through. But the good news is we take them out the next day, we find them an even better house, right? But I don't want to have to go and rescan in the copy of the EMD and the copy of the buyer representation agreement and the pre-approval letter. I don't want to do that. I just want to go into that other file and I want to grab it out of my transaction folder from 123 Main Street. So you can actually copy forms from one. I don't want to just change the name of 123 Main Street, right? Because I want that history in case there's ever a legal situation and maybe we find out we could have gotten that house. I want to have that file intact. But I do want to copy their pre-approval and their EMD over into my new file of the new home that we found them. So long story short, you can do all of that. You can bring those in. From here, I'm just going to click on my purchase agreement. You can easily mark things up in here as well if you need to remove a form, or let's say you got all the way to this step and you realize, oh, Colleen, you have your purchase agreement in upside down. You scanned it in upside down. I did that the other day. I was kind of embarrassed. So if you are all the way to this step, you're looking at your purchase agreement and you realize, oh, geez, I scanned it in upside down. You can actually go right to the page and you can rotate that page so it's in the proper order. So as you can see, I'm over here to the right. If you want to remove a particular page, delete it. Maybe you don't want to send a particular page. That's a private page between you and someone else. I can do that from here. So I can rotate this in the right order if I scanned it in incorrectly. But basically the last step, so let me go ahead and just save this. The last step here, I've added in my buyer. I've added in the documents that I want them to sign. I made some changes to this one. If you got all the way to this step, and let's say that you missed an area for signature, or let's say, grab Very Buyer here. Let's say you got all the way to this step and you missed a signature, or you're having them initial somewhere different. Most of the tagging is already set up for you. But I want to show you that I actually removed the tagging because I want you to be able to see it if you need to add it additionally. So if I got to this step and I am kind of doing that, giving them a choice if they want to have a home protection plan, yes or no. Okay, that I'm giving them that choice. Remember how I said you can use radio buttons that allow them to say yes, they want to have a home inspection, or no, they don't. They can only choose one of them. If they pick incorrectly, they can choose the other, but it will gray out one or the other. You can even include drop downs. Maybe you have two different home protection plans. One is $269 and one is $369. And you can have that in the drop down. So they could even select from the two different choices. Initialing pages. So maybe I want at the Very Buyer is going to initial at the bottom of the document. In this case, my buyer goes over here to the right. So I'm going to have his initials on every page. By the way, you can even select different pages. Maybe on your purchase agreement, you only have him initial every other page. On mine, we initial every page. So I've selected all 8 pages of the purchase agreement. Very Buyer is going to initial at the bottom right. So now you can see it's just dropped that into place. With my OCD. I'm going to move it because that's who I am. But I can actually set that right on the line. Obviously, if he was married, maybe Bertha Buyer, I could do the same thing for her and add those into place. Most of your forms should already be tagged. I removed the tagging when we started because I wanted to show you how to add these additional pieces on. If you got all the way to this step, and maybe you forgot, I did this the other day, you forgot to counter the price. So I changed all the terms, got the language just right, and I forgot to counter the price. There's those same great markup tools down here. So if I needed to cross out, nope, we're not going to remove the pool, or no, we're not going to include the washer or dryer, you've got those same tools right here. Lastly, you're really just setting up every place. Most of them should be already auto tagged, but every place you've made a change. So again, for where I am, we would have all the parties initial right here. And I want to make sure I'm witnessing my contract at the end, which we do in this area. I know some boards don't do that either, but I'm going to witness. And you can do pre-printed names. I can have my name right here, and you can just literally drag and drop these blocks for signing. Lastly, I'm going to go ahead and hit next. I can customize the invitation. Remember how I said if you're CCing a title company or a lender, you can put a personalized message in. You can do that right from here. You can even personalize what's in the subject line. And just like that, we're going to go ahead and hit send. Now it's going to go to the buyer, who's going to start that signing process. And then, of course, once he signs, it's going to go to me so I can witness it, and then on to that co-oping agent. You can see at any time if they have signed it. As you can see right here, I've got one that's completed, meaning all parties have signed it. I've got one, if it says draft, that means you never sent it. It has not made it out to the client. If there's only one of the two parties that have signed it, you'll see that as well. So you kind of have your whole history. Once it's signed, it's now dumped back right inside of your transaction so that you can review it. So let's take a quick look. I'm just going to open my email real quick. Yes.
Colleen,
yes.
can I interrupt you real quick?
Please.
Can you go back a step? The one question I had was about automatically adding the signature blocks and the initial blocks. Her layout, it has 4 optional initials, and she doesn't want that. So I was explaining to her she can create her own layout. Can you show her how to remove the the layout that's on there, clear it, and put on a different one that she's created?
Sure. I'm kind of can I go through the what it looks
Yeah,
like on their
yeah,
end, and then I'll
absolutely.
go back and do that one if
Absolutely.
it'll just be easier. I'm sorry.
No
Um,
worries. No, it's easier for you. Thank you.
but Lisa's absolutely right. You can, if there's something on there you don't want, by right clicking on it on the agent setup, you can actually remove it. A little trash can will come up. So if you've got optional and you want to make them radio buttons, you absolutely can do that. And I'll show you how to, I'm just going to show you real quick on the signing because I know I'm out of time. I'm 1 minute over. When they get to this, so in my email, I just want to show you real quick on what they get. In my email, download pictures here. It's going to come to them from you with your branding. You want to make sure you've got that in Transaction Desk, your logo and your picture under your settings. All they have to do is click Start Signing. Okay, that's going to open the document. As you can see, they're going to accept that it's a legal binding signature. And then they're simply going to either draw out, and I'm going to do this with my mouse, but they can either draw with their fingertip if they have a touch screen. They can draw with their mouse. They can choose a pre-generated font if they like. So let's say I just want it to be pre-generated. And then all they have to do is click. Now, Lisa and I both tell our clients, read it over first because it kind of jumps them around to the signatures. So we tell them, read it over first and then sign it. We put that right in their message that goes out to them. But now you can see it's actually applying their signature to all the places that you set up as the agent. Here's those radio buttons, so we can do yes or no. And then I'm simply applying those signatures. Okay, so pretty easy. It will tell them if they miss anything, it won't allow them to close. It will take them right to that particular place. So it's pretty foolproof. They can't sign in a wrong place. They can't miss a signature. So it does make it pretty foolproof. If you have, I'm just going to make one real quick here. If you have a template or layout that maybe your company has set up, or you have a form, let's say, I'm going to go out and make this even easier. Just going to go back. Sorry, I should have showed that before I left. But if you have a particular layout that is already being applied, so meaning your office or your brokerage went in and they marked up all the signatures and where they should go. If you want to make a change to one of those, that is easy as well. So let me just grab some forms here. Sorry, I should have showed that one. That's my fault. Sorry, Lisa. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to add a form right from we'll use our listing agreement on this one. And let's say on that listing agreement, which my company has just changed, I guess so many people have really kind of just changed them, but let's say that there is a particular, let's add in from our transaction, we're going to put in our seller here. We're going to say Samantha, our seller. So let's say that it is set up and the tagging is in place, but I don't like where something has been tagged. I want it in a different spot. Or maybe the signatures are wrong, or maybe it's a radio button that's not correct. You can always do that. I'm just going to grab one here. You can always remove or add one. I'm like, and I was just looking at mine. I'm like, why is this not tagged? Oh, we just changed our listing agreement. It was literally just released 2 days ago. And so we haven't tagged ours yet. So that'll be something I get to do today. If you want to remove something that's already in place. So let's say the brokerage has a template or a layout for Authentisign that's in place already. And I want to change it, or I don't want them to sign in that particular area. Or maybe I want to make the optional initials, maybe I want to make them those radio buttons that I showed you. You can simply right click and you can remove a tag. So as you can see right here where it says, there's kind of like a little garbage can, I can click on it and I can delete that. So even if your brokerage has set it up where the signatures go, or maybe you want to change it to a radio button or a drop down, all you have to do to change that is simply right click, or actually click on it. Then you're going to click that little garbage can and you can remove that action. There's also where you can add an email address. Again, you can add checkboxes. You can do optional initials, whether, yes, initial here or here. But I find if you do that, it's confusing to them. So I like the radio buttons a little bit better, like yes or no. But if one is already set into place and you want to remove it, you're simply going to click on it, click on that trash can, and you can remove it. All right. Any other questions, Lisa? I know I went a little bit over, but is there any other questions you want to jump in with?
And just, you may have showed it already before, but did you show them how to save the layout? So if they make changes to it now, they can save it as a new layout and rename it?
Great question. I did not, but if you go in, and I wish I could have shown you the automatic layout on this one, but as I mentioned, we just changed our purchase agreement, so probably this is going to end up getting done by me. You can go into layouts on this little tag right here, and you can apply a layout that you've previously created. You can create a new layout. So if you're doing this as an agent, you can do this here. Now, by the way, brokers can do this for an entire office under the broker setup. So a broker, like my broker, generally has their form all tagged, but we just changed it to incorporate some new language with the NAR settlement rules and things. So when the tagging is done on a brokerage level for an entire brokerage, you're going to do that under the broker tools. If you are doing it for yourself, you can tag it and create a layout, which will remember where those tags are. So the next time you're on this particular form, you can just apply that same layout. And of course, you can manage or edit your layouts too. Good question.
Thank you,
Colleen. A little more advanced. Yes.
And that should be it. No, okay. Great job. No other questions. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I'm sorry, I ran a couple of minutes over, but just a reminder, you can find the class recording under resources, recorded webinars, and that's also where you can find upcoming classes under the education corner there. And Lisa's got an awesome class coming up tomorrow, as a matter of fact, on pulling public records and tax records for properties. If you haven't taken this class, she'll show you how to do really awesome mailers. You can do an SOI, you can put in filters like, have lived there more than 10 years. You can do the labels if you're just doing Christmas cards and you want to send those out to a particular neighborhood, or maybe you send out magnets like Lisa's really good at. Anyway, she'll show you how to do all of that in tomorrow's class, tomorrow at 11 a.m. And that is the public records information. If you want to sign up, just go to the education corner, click on the click here to register. And just like today, you'll get that confirmation. All right. Well, happy selling. Hopefully you'll be listing some properties. We certainly need the inventory. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much, as always, for attending the webinar today. Have a great day. Thanks, Lisa.